ulama, among the Sahaba. And then let's look at the different cities. So let's look at Medina Munawwara, for example. In Medina Munawwara, you had a number of jurists. Now, I'm sure there were other jurists, but these are the ones that became famous because people began to go to them and learn from them. You know, like for example, take London. You've got a number of different masjids, you've got a number of different ulama teaching. Let's just take doctors, for example. You've got a number of different doctors. Normally, you'll just go to your local doctor, your local GP. But when it comes to a special matter which is beyond him and needs a special training, then he'll send you to, you know, the London hospital or some other hospital for the specific, you know, eye, nose and throat, or you know, or for cardiology, or for pathology, or any of the other specializations, because he doesn't know it. Likewise, you'd go to an alim, you'd learn from them, and if they couldn't, they'd send you to somebody else. Eventually, a few people would become more famous than others because everybody is resorting to them, everybody is going to them. I mean, it's just a natural selection process. You know, that's the natural evolution that takes place, you know, in that positive way, in that sense, right? So when you go to Medina, you had Aisha radiallahu anha, you know, and she lived for a number of years after the Prophet ﷺ had departed. So Aisha radiallahu anha, Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anha, Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, right? Now these are the tabi'een. Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, Urwa ibn al-Zubayr, Ibn al-Awam, right? Ali ibn Hussein, Salim ibn Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Umar's son, Sulaiman ibn Yasar, Qasim ibn Muhammad ibn Abi Zakaria, Nafi' ibn Shihab al-Zuhri. I'm sure some of you must have heard these names before, right? You had Abu Zanad, Abdullah ibn Dhakwan, Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, and you had Rabi'at ibn Abdul Rahman or Rabi'at al-Rai, right? So you had these famous scholars who became famous more than anybody else. Now obviously even among them, there would be some that would be even more famous. So for example, it's even related among the Sahaba that somebody came to one of them to ask a question and he said, you know, I don't know the answer, just go to so-and-so Sahabi, Abdullah ibn Abbas or somebody else, and ask him, whatever he tells you, come and tell me as well. It's just a natural thing, that's the way it happens, right? Because not everybody has the same level of knowledge. And if you're humble enough and you're a true scholar, you will consult others. Your learning never ends in Islam. Now when you go to Makkah Mukarramah, you had Ata ibn Abi Rabah. That's a great scholar of Makkah Mukarramah. You had Ikrimah, you had Mujahid ibn Jubair, and of course you had Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. Remember Ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Umar, these two were very young when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, but they had really absorbed a lot from the Prophet ﷺ. That's why they were able to really spread their knowledge afterwards, because they stayed for a lot longer. They come to Kufa. Now Kufa had a great number of people. You know, you had, for example, Alqamah ibn Qais al-Nakha'i. You had Masruq ibn al-Ajda', right? You had Ubaydah ibn Umar al-Salmani. You had Aswad ibn Yazid al-Nakha'i. You had Shurayh ibn Harith al-Makki, or al-Kindi rather. Shurayh al-Qadi is the famous Qadi that you hear about in the various stories that are related from that time. Ibrahim ibn Yazid al-Nakha'i, and you had Sa'id ibn Jubair. You go to Basra. In Basra you had Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu. You had Abu al-Aliya, Abu al-Sha'tha, Muhammad ibn Sirin, the great interpreter of dreams as well. In those times, the ulama were masters of more than one discipline. Both in terms of, I mean, when you look at Muhammad ibn Sirin, you'll find his aqwal. Hasan Basri, you'll find his opinions both in tafsir books. You'll find it for hadith. You'll find it for spirituality. You'll find it in fiqh. You'll find them in the various different disciplines. You'll find their names, because these were the barakah of their time allowed them to become a master and become proficient in all of these subjects, which is extremely difficult nowadays. Even to become a master in a single discipline, it is extremely difficult. Obviously, people began to go to these people. Slowly, slowly, they taught others, and they taught their students. So obviously, Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, Imam Shafi, Imam Muhammad, and Imam Malik, they were the students of the likes of these people that I just mentioned. And eventually what happened is that because these people had actually seen a walking, talking Islam, the entire culture of Islam still alive, there were more of these people who could actually understand the true spirit of the deen. But obviously, as with every subsequent generation, the light of prophethood is dimming, and there is less proficiency. And thus, eventually what you had is you had a lot less people who are as proficient as these masters. But eventually what happened is that there were 4 people, after the 3rd and 4th century, there were 4 people that literally everybody agreed upon that these are the 4 traditions that we will take from. Because these traditions, they proliferated. They spread far and wide. Maybe, and this was Abu Hanifa's tradition, this was Shafi'i, Malik, and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal's traditions. Right? They spread far and wide. Why? Because they codified a system. They collected the rulings together and presented it in a codified way. They had enough students. It was a natural selection by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was by design, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bringing people closer to them. Right? To these people more than others. Because if you look at it, though we only know 4 madhabs as such, although there's a 5th madhab today, and I'm sure there's a 6th and 7th one as well today, right? Contemporary madhab, modernists and progressives and so on and so forth. But in terms of traditional madhab, we see 4 that have actually stood the test of time, right? Have a historicity attached to it. There were others, but they didn't live. They lived maybe some didn't even live for a century. Some lived for the 1st generation, and then there weren't enough students to continue it. Because let's just say I've got all of these bright ideas, and I teach about 20 people, and they are very enlightened. Now these 20 people, they become very enlightened by that, but they don't feel it's good enough to pass on to anybody else, and they go and they start doing something else. Whatever I've taught is going to disappear. Do you know what I'm saying? Whatever I've taught is going to disappear. So now, I was told that the adhan wasn't going to be played, so that's why I carried on. But anyway, it's like, let's just say somebody writes something great and puts a book out. But that book sells for the 1,000 print run, and then after that it's never printed again. Right? It's remaindered, it's gone. That's it, that heritage is finished. But at the end of the day, it's the acceptance by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The acceptance that comes from Allah, the qubuliyah that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for these madhahib, right? That it was only these 4 that continued and that stood the test of time and were actually developed further and have come as they are. Because if you look, you had a school of Sufyan al-Thawri, Sufyan ibn Sa'id al-Thawri. Right? Sharik ibn Abdullah al-Nakhai. Nakhai had a school. He was teaching people. Right? You had Abu Sulaiman Dawood al-Zahiri. In fact, his school actually lasted a while longer until that eventually died out as well. That was a literalist school where they would look at everything in a very veridical, very verbatim way. Right? Like for example, one opinion that's mentioned from them is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says that La tabulu, do not urinate in still water. Do not urinate in still water. Now obviously, still water, the reason you don't urinate in there is because it pollutes it and others can't use it then, because it's still water and the impurity won't flow away. So it doesn't have a sense of self-purification. Alright? What some of the Zahiris said is that because the Prophet ﷺ said you can't urinate in there, it's prohibited. But you can defecate in there because he didn't say you can't defecate. So you can see the literalism that went into their perspective. And obviously that couldn't remain because it was too black and white. It didn't have any color to it, right? And the problem is that there is a neo-Zahirism today, which is that people are trying to return to Zahirism to a literal kind of outlook, right? And trying to just basically disqualify all of the heritage that we have from before. So anyway, you had Dawud al-Zahiri, you had Abu Abdurrahman ibn Muhammad al-Awza'i, very famous. Awza'i was very famous, and his discussions with some of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa as well. Then there was Muhammad ibn Abdurrahman ibn Abi Layla. Now there were others as well, but these are some of the prominent ones who had schools, but they weren't very enduring. They didn't last for too long. Their students maybe didn't have enough students or enough proficient students or enough famous students. Now, why did the other madhabs become so proliferated? Like if you look at it today, probably half of the madhab following world is Hanafi, right? Because if you look at just China alone, the 40 million, or according to some research, 100 million Muslims there are all Hanafi, right? You look at, massive in India, Pakistan, for the majority of it, except the southern area is Shafi'i, right? Sri Lanka is Shafi'i as well, right? Syria, you look at the whole Bosnia, you look at a number of the USSR, the previous pre-USSR states, and so on and so forth, right? Iran and other places. The second most prolific is the Malikis, not the Shafi'is, right? It's actually the Maliki. The whole of North Africa is about